It was 6:45 a.m. when I first heard the pounding, heavy, violent fists slamming against the front door of my lake cabin like they were trying to wake the dead. The echo cut through the morning silence like a war drum. I had just finished my sunrise jog around the property, the crisp mountain air still clinging to my skin. I was sipping black coffee, standing barefoot in my kitchen, taking in the stillness of the lake through the window when the noise shattered that peace. Then came the voice. Deep. Aggressive. Amplified by a megaphone. Open up. HOA Police. This is a code red enforcement raid. I nearly choked on my coffee. HOA Police? What kind of joke was this? I knew there was a local homeowners association on the other side of the ridge, but my 43-acre ranch cabin sat well outside their jurisdiction. I bought the land directly from the county, free and clear, specifically because I didn't want neighbors, rules, or nosy Karens with clipboards. I moved here to disappear, to enjoy the silence I earned after 12 years as a Navy SEAL. I left the battlefield behind, but I never forgot the sounds of aggression, the rhythm of a breach, the voice of a man pretending to be in charge. I moved quietly toward the front window and peeked through the curtain. What I saw made my stomach tighten. 3 men in full black tactical gear stood on my porch. They wore vests labeled HOA Enforcement Unit, with ridiculous homemade badges clipped to their chests. One of them had a battering ram. Another carried what looked like an airsoft rifle painted to mimic an AR-15. Their black SUVs were parked across the gravel path with magnetic decals reading Neighborhood Action Force. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. They looked like cosplayers pretending to be SWAT. But this wasn't a game, they were about to kick in my door. The leader, a tall man with a beard that looked glued on, barked another order. You are in violation of HOA Code 421A. Illegal occupancy, unauthorized dwelling, and resistance to compliance. Open this door, or we will be forced to execute a seizure. That's when I realized something, they weren't just bluffing. They thought I was scared. That I'd be confused, overwhelmed, maybe call a lawyer or start bargaining. But they picked the wrong cabin. I wasn't just some retired fisherman with a nice view. I was trained to disarm bombs, breach buildings, and take down enemy operatives in the dark. If these guys wanted to play soldier, they were about to learn what real training looked like. I slid along the kitchen wall and hit the emergency switch under the counter. Instantly, the power to the cabin shut off. My backup security system kicked in, silent alarms, internal motion cameras, and battery-powered lights flipped on in key hallways. This wasn't paranoia. This was preparation. The second man raised the battering ram and started slamming it against the door. 1. 2. Crack. The third hit sent the door swinging open, splintering the wooden frame and launching debris into the entryway. I was already gone, tucked into the side hallway just behind the coat rack, completely silent. The first man came in fast, sweeping his airsoft rifle left to right like he thought he was on a mission. He had no trigger discipline, no awareness, no formation. I waited until he passed the kitchen island, then slipped in behind him, wrapped one arm around his neck, and yanked him backward. He struggled, briefly. I pulled him to the ground, disarmed him, and zip-tied his hands using the plastic cuffs from his own vest. No words. Just precision. I dragged him behind the couch and moved back into the hallway. The second man entered cautiously, flashlight raised, shining it toward the back rooms. Clear left, he muttered. Move up. He took one step too far. A tripwire snapped against his shin, triggering a loud metallic bang. Not dangerous, just distracting. In his confusion, I lunged forward, slammed him into the wall, and drove my knee into his ribs. He dropped to the ground, wind knocked out, and I zip-tied him before he could recover. He groaned, "You can't do this, we have HOA jurisdiction." "You have nothing," I said. "You're trespassing." And you're done. The third guy, the bearded one, was still outside, pacing near the porch and barking into a walkie-talkie. Team Bravo, status report. What's your visual? He said. But there was no team. No Bravo. Just three idiots with a delusion of authority. I slipped out the side window, barefoot, moving around the corner of the cabin like I had 1,000 times in Afghanistan. I approached silently from behind the porch railing, heart calm, mind clearer than it had been in weeks. "Where's your deed, squatter?" he shouted into the air. "We know you're in there." I stepped up behind him and said, "Funny. You found the wrong guy to play games with." He spun, startled, pulling what looked like a taser. I snatched it from his hand, twisted his arm, and forced him to his knees. He didn't resist. I zip-tied him like the others and sat him down on the porch. "You broke into the home of a decorated Navy SEAL," I said coldly. "You better hope the sheriff shows up before I decide to file my kind of report." He stared at me, mouth open, eyes full of regret. "You're in deep," I added. "And this? This is only the beginning." I walked back inside, picked up my phone, and hit a pre-programmed contact. Sheriff Paulson answered on the second ring. "Jack? You all right?" "I've got 3 guys impersonating officers, breaking and entering, and waving fake HOA laws around like candy," I said. "They kicked in my door and tried to seize the property." There was silence. Then Paulson replied, "Karen again?" "Karen," I confirmed. "And she just kicked the wrong damn door." "I'm rolling out now," he said. "Don't do anything too permanent." No promises. I ended the call, walked back to the 3 bound men sitting on my deck, and stared at the fog rolling across the lake. The calm was returning, but underneath it, something was building. They didn't know it yet, but they had stepped into a war zone of their own making. And I was the last man they should have ever tried to ambush. I stood there on the deck, arms crossed, watching these 3 wannabe enforcers fidget in their zip ties like kids caught sneaking into a movie. Their tactical vests were dusty from the scuffle, one had a bloody nose, and the leader, the tall guy with the glued-on beard, kept looking at me like I was the monster in his bedtime story. He should have been afraid. I hadn't even broken a sweat. This wasn't just a scuffle over HOA rules. This was an attempted raid on my home, a full-blown illegal entry by men who thought a fake badge and a vest gave them authority. I'd dealt with pirates off the Somali coast, insurgents in crumbling cities, cartel strongholds in the jungle, and these guys were the sloppiest crew I'd ever seen. One of them started whimpering. "Man, we were just following orders. Karen said you were some squatter with fake deeds. She said this place was part of her jurisdiction." I crouched down in front of him. "Do I look like a squatter to you?" He avoided eye contact. I don't know, man. I just got paid to show up." That confirmed what I already suspected. This wasn't some random enforcement team. This was a rented crew. Karen Fielding, the self-appointed HOA president, had paid these guys under the table to come out here and force me off my land. She'd tried threats before, letters in my mailbox, notices taped to my gate, even sending her teenage son to warn me about fines for building without HOA approval. I laughed in his face and told him to mow his own lawn before worrying about mine. That must have been when she snapped. I headed back inside and opened the black case on my bookshelf, pulling out a folder that contained every legal document related to my property, the county-approved deed, the building permits for the cabin, even the land survey with coordinates. All legal. All recorded. And none of it had even a whisper of HOA jurisdiction. Karen's people had no power here. They never did. I brought the folder back out and tossed it on the table next to the zip-tied men. "You see that?" I said. "That's the law. That's what real property rights look like. What you boys brought here. That was a crime. And I'm not just going to let this go." The leader straightened his back, still trying to act tough. We were just enforcing HOA Code 421, Community Expansion Protocol. You're on annexed land. I shook my head. There is no 421A. You're quoting something Karen made up in her living room while watching crime shows. You can't annex private land without due process, and certainly not with 3 goons and a battering ram. Just then, I saw a dust trail kicking up along the gravel road leading to the cabin. Sheriff Paulson's cruiser appeared over the ridge, followed by 2 more deputies in trucks. They pulled up fast, lights off, but ready. Paulson stepped out in jeans and boots, his badge shining in the morning light. He adjusted his hat, looked over the scene, and let out a long, tired sigh. "Jack, I told you to take it easy out here." I replied. Until these 3 tried to break down my door and seize my land in the name of a fictional HOA law. He nodded slowly, then turned to the 3 men. "You boys want to explain what in God's name gave you the idea to impersonate officers and commit felony trespassing?" The leader opened his mouth, but Paulson cut him off. "Save it. I saw the HOA decals on your SUVs. I'm guessing those aren't registered either." "They're temporary tags," one of the men mumbled. Paulson scoffed. "Right. Probably printed them at home too." The deputies began collecting evidence. They photographed the broken door, catalogued the fake uniforms, and bagged up the legal documents the men carried. One deputy flipped through the printed paperwork and raised an eyebrow. "You've got to be kidding me. There's no signature from a judge, no county seal. Just Karen's signature and a clip art logo that says, HOA Task Force." Paulson turned to me. "You want to press charges?" I didn't hesitate. "All of them. Impersonation. Forced entry. Conspiracy. Attempted land seizure. And I've got a flash drive inside with footage from their SUV's dashcam. You're going to want to see it." Paulson nodded. "We'll process everything. This isn't the first time Karen's done something shady, but it's the first time she's crossed into felony territory. She's been trying to get her hands on this land ever since I moved in," I said. "Told me at the general store a few weeks ago that my cabin was in the way of her HOA's new lakefront park idea." He raised his brows. "A park?" She told the county that her HOA was just enforcing bylaws. Now it looks like she was staging a hostile land grab. "She underestimated me," I said. "Figured I was just another retiree who'd fold when things got scary." One of the deputies radioed back to dispatch. "Yeah, we've got 3 in custody, multiple charges pending. Tell the DA we'll need a warrant for Karen Fielding's property and HOA files." Paulson looked at me. "You just opened a can of worms, Jack. She's not going to walk away from this one clean." I folded my arms and stared down the hill. "Good. Because I'm done letting people think they can strong-arm their way into my life. I bought this land fair and square. I earned my peace. And anyone who threatens it is going to get more than just a warning." The sheriff motioned to his team. "Load 'em up. Let's go pay Karen a visit." As the squad cars disappeared down the road, I stood alone on the porch again. The fog had lifted. The sun was out now, lighting up the lake with a shine so clear you could see every ripple. But something had shifted. The quiet wasn't the same. Now it was the calm before the real storm. Because Karen thought she had power. She thought her fake laws and scare tactics were enough. But she didn't count on one thing. She didn't know what happens when you mess with a man who spent his life surrounded by real danger. She brought a clipboard to a battlefield. And I wasn't backing down. 10 minutes after the sheriff rolled out with the fake enforcers in cuffs, I stood on my porch watching the wind dance across the lake, but my mind wasn't calm. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Karen Fielding, the so-called president of the Lakeside Expansion HOA, wasn't just some nosy neighbor with a superiority complex. She was orchestrating a scam so bold it was criminal. She'd tried to seize private land with fake legal codes, hired unlicensed muscle dressed like cops, and ordered them to storm my cabin like it was a cartel hideout. And now, thanks to their sloppiness and my readiness, we had video evidence, forged documents, and 3 bumbling idiots ready to squeal. I knew one thing from my military days: when you catch foot soldiers this easily, the general's never far behind. Sheriff Paulson called me 2 hours later. I was fixing the busted doorframe when the phone buzzed. "Jack," he said, voice tight with authority, "we've got her. Warrant came through. Found more than we expected." I set my hammer down and leaned against the porch post. "Talk to me." "She wasn't even surprised," Paulson said. "Acted like it was some misunderstanding. Said her HOA security division was authorized to enforce community codes. Problem is, those codes don't exist, and neither does her authority over any land beyond the Eastern Ridge." "She's been forging documents," I said. "Making up rules, maps, bylaws. She thinks if she acts confident enough, people will just go along with it." "You're not wrong," Paulson replied. "We found a room in her house set up like an office, printer, scanner, files labeled with property names, and a map with pins stuck in 10 different parcels around the lake, including yours. She even had a plan sketched out for converting your land into a parking lot and kayak rental site." My jaw clenched. So she really was building an empire. "Looks that way," Paulson said. "We also found contracts, blank ones, with signatures already forged. One of them had your name at the bottom." That was enough to push me from angry to furious. She wasn't just trying to scare me off the land, she was trying to legally erase me from it. A hostile takeover, HOA style. She's being charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, trespassing, and hiring unlicensed security to carry out illegal operations, Paulson added. "DA's office is already reviewing the footage you gave us." "That GoPro file from the SUV?" "Yeah. She was in it. Clear as day. Saying, 'Make it quick, scare him out, grab the deed, and we'll bury him in paperwork later.' Her exact words. It's airtight." "Good." I walked back into the cabin, surveyed the damage again. Nothing I couldn't fix, some splintered trim, a busted lock. But the real repair job wasn't on the house. It was on the community. Because I had a feeling I wasn't her first target, just the first one to fight back. Sure enough, the next day, 2 neighbors I'd never even met showed up at my gate. A retired couple, mid-60s, nervous but determined. The woman introduced herself. "I'm Linda. This is Carl. We own the old lodge across the lake." I let them in, and we sat on the deck. Carl pulled out a wrinkled folder. "Karen's been trying to force us into her HOA for 2 years, he said. We kept refusing, so she started sending us fines. Then fake citations. Then she said she had the right to claim our dock as community property. She even threatened to sue us," Linda added. "We didn't know what to do until we heard what happened to you." I took the folder and flipped through the papers. Same format. Same fake signatures. Same nonsense codes. Karen had built a criminal enterprise, weaponizing bureaucracy to steal land from people who didn't have the means, or the background, to stop her. But I did. "You're not alone anymore," I told them. She picked the wrong vet to push around. By the end of that week, I had gathered a group of 8 property owners from around the lake. All had been harassed, pressured, or tricked by Karen's made-up rules. We formed a coalition, and with Sheriff Paulson's backing, filed a civil suit on top of the criminal charges already stacking against her. Karen tried to counter. She showed up at the county office with a high-priced lawyer and a fake smile. She claimed it was all a misunderstanding, that her documents were drafts and the men she hired were just neighborhood peacekeepers. But she underestimated how fast the story had spread. Local news picked it up. Headlines read, "Fake HOA raid foiled by Navy SEAL homeowner," and "Lake community stands up against rogue HOA president." Her lawyer quit 2 days later. The judge issued a temporary restraining order against her and froze the HOA's funds. An audit revealed tens of thousands in misused dues. Money funneled into her personal accounts, into those fake enforcement uniforms, and even into remodeling her kitchen. When she finally walked into court, she was alone. No board. No supporters. Just one very desperate woman trying to talk her way out of years of fraud. I was there in the front row, arms folded, wearing my old Navy SEAL team jacket. She glanced at me once, just once, and then lowered her head. She pled guilty. Sentenced to 6 months in county jail and ordered to pay restitution to every victim she targeted. The HOA? Dissolved. Its assets auctioned off, including the lakeside office she built with stolen funds. Guess who bought it? Me. It sits empty now, right at the edge of the lake. A symbol. Not of her authority, but of how quickly a false empire crumbles when one person stands up and says, "No more." And that's what this fight became. It wasn't just about my land. It was about sending a message: you can't fake your way into power. Not in my town. Not on my ranch. Not against a man who's spent his life facing real threats. The lake's peaceful again. But just in case? The sign out front still reads, "Private property, trespassers will regret it." The weeks that followed Karen's sentencing were a strange blend of satisfaction and cleanup. I finally had peace, but I'd also inherited the scars of battle, both literal and figurative. The locals now looked to me not just as the guy with the lake cabin, but as the one who stood his ground when no one else could. That kind of respect comes with a certain weight. I didn't ask for leadership, but when chaos clears, someone's got to rebuild the ground it scorched. That's exactly what I started doing. First order of business, community meetings. Not HOA nonsense, real meetings, voluntary, informal, just neighbors looking out for neighbors. We held the first one in my backyard, under string lights with folding chairs set out and a big pot of chili simmering over the fire pit. More than 20 families showed up. People brought stories, frustrations, even old letters they'd received from Karen threatening fines for things like unpainted mailboxes or non-standard garden gnomes. It was absurd. But it was also deeply disturbing how many had silently complied, thinking she held real power. I stood in front of them, holding one of those fake citations in my hand. "This," I said, "isn't law. It's intimidation in ink. You've all been victims of a scam. But not anymore." From that night forward, something shifted. Folks began to help one another again. The dock that Karen had claimed as public property was restored to Carl and Linda. Another neighbor, a single mom named Rhea, finally started building the greenhouse she'd put off for 2 years because of HOA harassment. Kids started fishing off the public piers again without being scolded by clipboard enforcers. The lake had always been ours, but now it felt like ours again. Meanwhile, I made it my mission to ensure Karen's damage couldn't be repeated. I filed paperwork with the county to formalize our land boundaries, pushing for a protective designation that would block any future HOAs from encroaching unless voted unanimously by all landowners. It passed. The law now officially recognized the land around the lake as autonomous private property. No HOA, no board, no nonsense. But I wasn't done yet. I bought Karen's former HOA office at the edge of the lake, the same one she tried to use as her command center. Not out of spite, though I'll admit that was part of it, but because I wanted to turn it into something better. I gutted the interior, tossed out all the fake documents, the smug signs like HOA members only, and the ridiculous framed, code enforcement awards she printed for herself. In their place, I built the Lakeside Veterans Outreach Center. It started small. A few desks, a coffee maker, a quiet room for therapy or just conversation. Word spread. Local veterans came forward. Some from just across the lake, others from the next town over. Many had been isolated, off the grid, just like I had been. But they were tired of fighting life alone. At the center, they found community again. We offered resume help, PTSD resources, even self-defense classes taught by yours truly. The same strength I'd used to protect my cabin. Now I was teaching others how to channel it too. The outreach program gained traction fast. One weekend, a local news crew came out to do a follow-up story. The headline read, "From HOA Raid to Healing, Navy SEAL Turns Cabin into Community Beacon." The reporter asked me what kept me going, what made me stay after all the chaos. I looked out at the lake and said, because this place is worth fighting for. And because some battles are fought with fists, but the most important ones? They're won by standing your ground. And yet, even in peace, old instincts die hard. One night, a few months later, I saw headlights creeping down the private trail that led to my property. Slow. Deliberate. Not locals. I grabbed my coat, flicked off the porch light, and waited behind the tree line with my flashlight and sidearm, just in case. The truck finally stopped, engine idling. Two guys got out. Dressed in black. But I didn't need night vision goggles to tell they weren't a threat. They were reporters. Turns out, a documentary team was producing a special on modern land disputes in America, and they wanted to feature my story. I agreed, but with one condition: we include the community, not just me. Because I hadn't won this fight alone. I had the sheriff, my neighbors, and the countless people who found the courage to speak up once the lie had been exposed. During the filming, Carl stood on his dock and told the cameras, if Jack hadn't pushed back, we'd all still be under Karen's thumb. The whole lake would be one big HOA prison. Rhea added, he didn't just fight back, he gave us a voice. When the documentary aired, Karen's mugshot was blurred, but everyone knew who she was. She'd become a cautionary tale, a warning about what happens when fake authority meets real resolve. As for me, I kept my life simple. Fishing in the mornings. Teaching a few kids how to track and trail in the woods. Hosting community dinners once a month. I even put up a wooden sign on the road near my gate. It reads, Lakeside Ranch, home of the free, because someone stood. I didn't need a medal. I didn't want attention. But I had something better: peace, purpose, and a place that no one could steal from me again. Sometimes, folks still ask me, Jack, what if something like this happens again? I smile, stretch my back, and say, then they better bring more than clipboards and fake badges. Because this cabin, this lake, this land, it's under new management, mine. And if they ever come knocking again, they'll find more than a Navy SEAL at the door. They'll find a community that learned how to fight back. And this time, we're all armed with the truth.